What can be done about the future? Is it enough to merely experience revelation and personal spiritual growth that comes with it and the enlightenment that comes with revelation? Or is it necessarily to physically act to rid the world of the systems of control and deception which have brought us to the current state and thus change the fundamental nature of modern civilization for our future generations? Do you really want your grandchildren drinking fluoridated water, believing that such a neurotoxin might whiten their teeth a bit? Such scientism and anti-science at its worst, such as fluoridation of water, has been a slow killer and a chemical to aid in mind control for decades now, leaving in its wake countless generations of people. And the effects of fluoridating our water for generations are, quite frankly, not known, the full effects. And yet, while many of us know that fluoride is a poison and they're deliberately putting it in our water, and fluoride is a byproduct of aluminum manufacturing when they scrape the smoke stacks and clean that gunk off of it, that fluoride gunk is very costly for them to get rid of. And so the American Dental Association is arguably was created to champion fluoride in our water, but it certainly did back the idea of fluoride whitening teeth, and so it's a good idea to put it in our drinking water. Don't really get the correlation there, but they did it. And this byproduct, this poisonous byproduct of aluminum manufacturing, really has no place in our drinking water supply. And in fact, over 85 to 90% of United States municipal drinking water supplies have this chemical in them. And as it stands right now today, there's really not much being done to alert people of this problem and the hazards, let alone nothing being done to force these water companies to cease and desist with the poisoning. And nothing will get done unless laws are made to the contrary of what we've got right now. Now, if we, the people, cannot prevent bureaucrats and corporate vampires from poisoning our frickin' water supply, then what possible chance do we have to affect real meaningful change when it comes to some of the less obvious, although often far more egregious acts of war and genocide against us all? Does anyone actually expect the current system of government to accomplish anything but endlessly bickering in the Hegelian game of politics, set up and run by and for the plutocratic oligarchs and psychopaths? I would say that anyone who expects the government to change this sort of thing on their own hasn't really thought this through. But expecting them to do so is tantamount to a rabbit petitioning a pack of hungry wolves about a vegan dinner. If we're unable to affect change when it comes to the most basic human right of clean, poison-free drinking water, what chance do we actually have in terms of preventing all future generations from being subjected to the fantasies of the heliocentric model, for example? Indeed, the very systems we were raised to respect and even pledge allegiance to were founded in deception and have become completely corrupted by greed and the lust for power. Anyone who denies the existence of scientism in terms of systemic legislation created by fake science and the lasting adverse effects of such institutionalized scientism need not look any further than the fact that fluoride is deliberately placed in our frickin' drinking water supply. So if a small group of aluminum manufacturers can literally sell their chemical waste to our water suppliers under the assumption that it might whiten our teeth is beyond insane. Yet that opinion, held by a group of bought and paid for lientists on the ADA, continues to force most Americans to drink cook and bathe in a known neurotoxin, fluoride. If anyone doubts the so-called mainstream media is intentionally deceptive and is indeed just a mouthpiece for the psychopathic power structures, must really ask themselves why the media hasn't done anything really to raise awareness of this topic and other topics like fluoridated water, which, fluoridated water isn't even considered a conspiracy theory. It's admitted, it's known, it's on the books. They're putting fluoride in the water, and it is a neurotoxin, and in high enough quantities it will kill you. And the necessary studies have not been done in terms of long-term exposure to these chemicals. And in fact, the idea that this fluoride is somehow whitening teeth and therefore we should drink it is just absolute pseudoscience nonsense. And yet, that's what's on the books of our law. The same law that will incarcerate and imprison people for possessing pot. It's ludicrous. The mainstream, so-called mainstream media perpetuates a narrative of fear and paranoia in order to create an environment where people willingly sacrifice their freedom in exchange for a perceived security from threats that were put in place by the very government that claims to be out there to protect us. So people will sacrifice freedom and rights in exchange for perceived security from a threat that doesn't really exist. Security from problems which were either fabricated whole cloth by the media or set into motion by the powers that be and simply parroted by the media. So, like, for example, the United States entered World War II after Pearl Harbor was attacked by Japanese kamikaze pilots. However, the entire Pearl Harbor incident could have been prevented, but it was allowed to occur by the government. The media ingrained this false flag attack into the public conscience, provoking the desired reaction of American grassroots support for finally entering the war, which America opposed entering World War II up to that point. So they used this so-called catastrophe that was allowed to go through by the government. They used that crisis in order to get a reaction from the public that they wanted. So this is a good example of how mind control manipulation can literally cause, like all of our grandparents to have been severely, deeply affected by this war. Many of them maybe lost their lives or had siblings did. Same thing goes with the Vietnam conflict. The United States entered that conflict in response to the infamous Gulf of Tonkin incident, which in fact never actually occurred in reality. It was totally fabricated by the U.S. intelligence services and repeated media outlets of that time. Another prime example of mind control, which forced American citizens into war. And with Vietnam, it was a little bit different than World War II because people were literally forced, drafted, conscripted into the army to fight, whereas in World War II, they actually convinced people to join willingly. We're certainly in trouble when all systems available to us appear to be completely useless at best, or even worse, counterproductive or antithetical to common moral values held by the vast majority of people. So, if this sort of truth doesn't have a realistic chance of being broadcast across the mainstream media outlets, which have been set up to reach the majority of people, then other means must be implemented. If the corporate fascist government is completely removed from the will or oversight of the people, then other systems of government must be implemented, lest we are guilty by association and inaction. And I would argue that it is our right and our duty to replace an ineffective government. And that's really the only thing that I see as a major possibility for changing the future. But inaction certainly is not an option. raising awareness to these sort of topics is something that any and all of us can do, and we should do, we need to do, because until people realize that there are these sorts of major, just unbelievable problems, then we don't have enough people to even try to solve such problems. So like me and you are not going to get the fluoride out of our water supplies, but if everybody in a given town petitions for something like that, perhaps. Make no mistake, we are living through the great unveiling or revelation predicted in the Bible. Anyone who is out to deceive people during this point in history had best tread carefully, for the light of truth really shines bright in these darkest of times. While I personally have faith that God, the creator of all things, will only allow the wicked state of the world to continue for so long, it's imperative that we do everything in our personal power to plant the seeds of truth and light in the world for the future. We cannot necessarily sit around and wait for God to strike down immediate change for us. While faith is a powerful tool, faith without action can lead us astray through complacency. I believe that God acts through us, which means our action is sometimes necessary to fulfill the will of God. It doesn't appear that God is going to swoop down and save us. Some may call this line of thinking radical, but I would say, is it radical to want clean drinking water for ourselves and for future generations? As long as I've been alive, God has done, absolutely nothing to stop the increased fluoridation of water, except for one thing, and that is, of course, the very fact that we are now aware of and discussing the fluoride in our water supplies, which I think is a huge score for God, right? I mean, could you imagine if we lived in a world without the knowledge availability that we have? We'd be screwed. Nobody would know about fluoride in the water, and we wouldn't even have a chance to combat the problem. So I read this as a sign that it is up to us to actually go out and enact this sort of change. And with the truth on our side and being on the right side of this non-poisoning our water argument, then we are, in effect, vessels for the will of God and the hand of God to a very literal sense. And by the way, they're coming after that, our ability to communicate freely on the internet as well. And sooner or later, mark my words, anyone with an opinion that isn't in line with the official narrative will be shut down. And that's why it's so unnerving to see the very beginnings of this corporate internet censorship that we've seen with like the YouTube purge, Alex Jones getting deplatformed, and everything that we've seen in the last couple of years with internet censorship. They really do not want these truths getting out, because it really is like a wildfire to this system. This system is built on deception, and a little bit of truth can take down the entire house of cards. And so they really do not want us capable of disseminating our ideas and the truth to the wide audience of the world. And they will do whatever they can to stifle that. And it's coming down the pipe. Sooner or later, it's going to be very difficult to get your opinions out there. But thank God, right now we do have what we've got with the internet in its current state. Now, it's very fair to say that the large communications corporations have been bought up by the CIA and other such government entities with infinitely deep pockets and influence in the world. So if anyone were to, say, poison one single municipal water supply, they would be put underneath the jail. Yet the United States government has given the green light for wholesale dumping of fluoride into most of our water supplies without any sort of repercussion. What's radical is to sit around and allow such an insanely stupid practice to continue in our name and on our dime. We're paying for it. We pay them for that water. We pay them to poison us, believe it or not. Anyone who thinks that this isn't a big deal should really go in and research exactly what fluoride does to living organisms. So who does one write to in order to stop such a thing? How many people would be needed to petition against water fluoridation or poisoning us before it would even be considered? Is it even possible to enact such a change via the systems that we currently have available to us? If the answer to that is no, then when it comes to something as critical as clean water, then what chance do we have when it comes to something more abstract, like the spinning ball Earth nonsense? It's really high time for people to drop their egos and quit worrying about fitting in with the herd. I know there are a great many people out there who are indeed woke to flat Earth and fluoride and lots of other things, yet refuse to go on the record or put their neck out for the truth or take any real action to spread the truth to others in their inner circles. At some point, sacrifices will need to be made for the truth. And I don't mean like going and killing chickens, I mean like personal sacrifices. At the end of the day, we're all going to end up at the same point. Whether it's tomorrow in a car accident or 50 years from now, old in a bed, everyone's going to die. Sad as that may be. Everyone, rich and poor, free and bond, every race, color, and creed will eventually leave this physical plane and coalesce with the mind of the Creator. When that day comes, none of the riches or possessions we've accrued in the world will matter. The only thing that will matter at that point is really how we treated one another and which personal battles we chose to take. If we refuse to stand up to deception, corruption, and frankly evil, then we are guilty by association and inaction. We were all born into a world of deception, treachery, and inequity. This deception begins with the preposterous lie that the world is a spinning ball, insignificant as a grain of sand on the beach. The entire foundation of the modern paradigm is built upon this grand lie, yet many people see no apparent motive for such a bizarre lie, and so they determine it is therefore must be the truth. If I'm forced to choose between the truth with poverty and being deceived in luxury, well, I choose the truth with poverty every time, for I know that our life on this world is limited, while eternity transcends time altogether. We're taught to believe in evolution as the second major part of this deception. While no physical evidence in the fossil record can be found to support the notion that we all descended from apes, this is exactly what is taught as actual fact in the classroom. The idea of evolution robs us collectively of our unique sovereignty over the world, suggesting that we're merely the coincidental outcome of some freakish chemical reaction which spawned the first single-celled organisms. We now appear to understand the blueprints for life, or DNA, which purports every cell in our body contains billions of lines of code. This is mainstream science that claims this, and yet mainstream science denies the idea of a creator. Is it even possible to have complex blueprints or code without first having an architect or a programmer to create such blueprints or code? Every living thing is miraculous to the extent that we can think for ourselves, heal ourselves. If damage is taken, we self-replicate or reproduce and pass on memory to our descendants in the form of instincts. People are the pinnacle of this living technology, as it were. As we are self-aware, we have a conscience and curiosity. Each person is an amazing, unique creation who deserves a life of truth and a chance to fulfill our potential as human beings. And the state of the world as it is thwarting that right. Furthermore, we're made of very simple materials, no less, mostly water and carbon, which makes the work of the Creator all the more impressive. With all its bravado and posturing, modern science can't do so much as create a single seed or a single cell from scratch. and yet they claim to rival God because we sort of understand DNA and theoretical astrophysics, which is the pinnacle of arrogance and ignorance at once. So, how is it even possible that we, mostly agreeable and in harmony with nature people, have come to this point in history with so many wars and greed and destruction as our trademarks? Our number one export is war and greed. The answer is through long-term planning and manipulation through secret societies, whom I personally believe are headed by the devil himself, Lucifer and the fallen angels spoken of in, well, practically all major religions have accounts of angels and fallen angels. Um, Many people view such secretive organizations like the Freemasons as these philanthropic organizations. However, it appears that Freemasons and other brotherhoods provide a platform which really forces loyalty through bribery, extortion, blackmail, and secrecy. Anyone who scoffs at the idea of like the Illuminati or scoffs at the idea of a powerful secret society holding the reins of power in the world should at least consider the US dollar bill is covered with symbology of the Illuminati, and the majority of the so-called founding fathers were Freemasons. This isn't to indict everyone who's a Freemason, though. Quite the contrary. It's clear that the majority of Freemasons are completely unaware of any nefarious activity or planning in the upper echelons of the craft. Apprentices in the first 3 degrees, or the Blue Lodge, where most Masons remain, um, they are deliberately misled about certain elements of the Brotherhood and certain meanings of things. However, they are misled to believe that they have a good foundational understanding of these things. So they are, by definition, deceived about the true goal and objects of Freemasonry. Now, this provides the evil sitting on top of the pyramid with a front group, plausible deniability of well-intentioned, really innocent people who will defend the order out of sheer ignorance of the overall goals or worldview held by the elite of that organization. It seems that the psychopathic tendencies displayed by the powers of the world are not by chance, but by design. The merciless deception, poisoning, and slaughter of human beings is not something any normal person would go along with willingly. But when you have a power structure which is run by Lucifer, even decent, well-meaning people can be coerced or manipulated into doing all sorts of terrible things. So, what exactly can we do to enact real change to this evil system within our lifetime? Is that possible? I thought about this question quite a bit, and the only thing I've come to is that we've got to wake everyone up. We can't do this alone. We definitely do need God on our side, and we need to stick together. And I do believe God's on our side, and that we've got one another, but we just can't do it alone. Uh, so, like, if each of us were to wake up at least, say, one person, and that person does the same thing. So if you wake someone up, the rule is they've got to wake up someone else too, etc. And we may not be able to wake everyone up that we try to wake up, but surely we can at least each do one, right? If everyone were to decide to proactively wake up just one single person who then follows and does the same thing, the truth will spread like a wildfire. With God and the truth on our side, there's no way that we can fail, even if the process kills us. I would prefer to die for the truth and for the good of humanity than to live forever in a shallow facade created to imprison our minds. Any old day of the week. The time has come for everyone to choose a side on this matter. In this world, it certainly appears that luxury and ignorance are winning. However, this is all destined to change. The truth cannot be put back in. The genie can't be put back in the bottle, and the truth cannot be unlearned. So we definitely have this advantage. We don't need to deceive or trick people into the truth. They just have to be shown the truth. And of course, some people, it falls on deaf ears. If you don't have eyes to see and ears to hear, it's not going to do you much good. What good are the eyes if the mind is blind, right? So we've been convinced that we need the Federal Reserve notes to achieve anything, when it is in fact people that we need. It is people who get things done, and not money. Certainly not debt notes. The US dollar is the biggest scam in the history of scams, as it holds absolutely no value and represents, in fact, a debt. Yet we are convinced that dollars make the world go round, which it doesn't, or that if we want to accomplish something in this world, it has to be done with quantification of dollars. There's always a price tag to everything, it seems, even when it comes to churches, which is a little bit weird. So while the Fed magically creates wealth from thin air, the only thing which keeps the cash deception going is our faith in the currency and our willingness to participate in this currency and to continue valuing our goods and services in terms of the dollar, the petrodollar. While I fully understand that money is necessary to support any complex society, certainly I can't give you a chicken and a half. I can't barter a chicken and a half for something that's worth a chicken and a half. So you've got to have some form of currency. But we certainly do not need evil, greedy bastards enslaving us with our currency. That's got to go. The Federal Reserve has got to go. And one single person or 100,000 people are not going to enact that sort of change. There has to be a critical mass of people who demand this sort of meaningful, lasting, real change in the way things are going. Now, personally, I've sacrificed and continue to sacrifice for the sake of the truth. When I first learned about Flat Earth, I had been running a successful home-based business for several years. Within a single year of publicly proclaiming that the world is not a spinning ball and helping others to realize this truth, my business was destroyed, lost all of my clients within a week of one another, lost my home, and my life really changed at a fundamental level. Even now, 3.5 some odd years later, I'm still feeling the effects of that revelation. And it does come with some tribulation, it truly does. Now I understand that material possessions sort of weight us down, weight our souls down, and they become chains which bind us to the world. Now I know that, just how deceived I once was, believing in everything from the spinning ball Earth to who knows what else, UFOs from another galaxy, and all the trappings that come along with the ball Earth infinite space theory. But I know how deceived I once was, and the information that I grew up believing to be true is in fact all a bunch of massive, unbelievable lies designed strictly to imprison our minds and force us further away from God the Creator, the truth, and the source. I wouldn't trade the truth for anything in the world, but I do pray that one day we can live in harmony with nature, know the truth, and enjoy the benefits of living in the most technologically advanced, amazing civilization known in history. But as it stands right now, this world is run from the top down by psychopathic atheists who serve the fallen angels either willingly or by bribery or by extortion or just because some of them are psychos. We cannot expect to play by the rules of this world or to use the systems available in this world to affect any real change. If no substantial change is possible via traditional avenues, then we must create new paths towards change. We certainly cannot stand idly by while a very small number of so-called elites continue taking steps towards drowning us in debt, while deceiving our future generations and poisoning us with our very water supply. Without loads of money standing behind a given topic of change, nothing will ever happen to enact changes in legislation, even if the critical mass of people stand behind the issue. People doesn't amount to shit these days. You've got to have lobbyists. Political change is only possible if you've got millions of dollars for lobbying. Is this the sort of system that we agreed to and have so much pride in? A system of moral prostitution governed by greed and deception? I don't think so. I never signed up for that. At this point, we've been lied to our entire lives. We're forced to pay taxes to a tyrannical, psychopathic government responsible for starting pretty much all modern wars of aggression. Uh, we have a capitalist, greed-centric medical system which has become priced as a super luxury, strapping most with debt which may never be fully repaid, thus ruining our credit, and ultimately this same medical system that we're just paying astronomical fees to treats us with chemicals and drugs for a profit, even if the chemicals and drugs might kill you. Our primary educational system ensures a future generation of dumbed down, spineless drones incapable of critical free thought, all of whom would ideally believe we live upon a spinning ball in space. Our secondary education has been priced as yet another super luxury and further indoctrinates future generations into conforming with a system that is nothing less than pure evil, of course, strapping them with debt for something as fundamental as a diploma, which often isn't even worth the paper that it's printed on. With all of these problems, major, severe problems that it seems most people don't even realize exist, it's simply not possible for any one person or even a large group of people to overcome a system so overwhelmingly powerful, deceptive, and ingrained in our social structure. Who can wage war unto this beast? Thankfully, we're not alone in this battle against spiritual wickedness in high places, and the Creator has promised to set things right in the world, whether in our lifetimes or maybe in the lifetime of some future generation. Never before has history seen deception be unveiled as we've seen it. 20 years ago, I would have never considered how drastically my worldview would have changed as it has up to now, but lo and behold, it certainly has. The world will be a vastly different place in another 20 years, and that can go either way. It's really up to us now to decide how this is all going to unfold. We must not allow deception, corruption, and greed to rule the world beyond our lifetimes. Not one of us will live forever, but the steps we take now to enact real and meaningful change will reverberate throughout history, just as the steps we choose to never take will die unrealized forever. If you cannot wake up a friend to the truth about the stationary plane Earth, at least wake them up to something that we can all relate to, because there's lots of big problems on the world that have nothing to do with flat Earth. Whether it's the delivery of drinking water or the Federal Reserve Ponzi scheme, the existing systems of government have failed us terribly. We cannot vote our way out of this. The entire system is a corrupt failure, which is being propped up by our collective, unwitting indentured servitude and outright slavery to a cabal that regards us as mere cattle. We do not need a group of despots printing our money out of its value. We must get rid of the Federal Reserve as soon as possible. We don't need to spend trillions of dollars in war against people who've done absolutely nothing against us or against our so-called empire. We don't need to give NASA $20 billion a year to fake spacewalks and pretend they're in orbit. Allowing this out-of-control government to brainwash our children is a terrible idea, but it's being forced upon us. Unless you can afford private school or can accommodate homeschooling, it's literally a crime to withdraw a child from this brainwashing campaign that is mandated by the federal government. So these are pretty big problems, major problems that I can't do anything about, but we can. And so I'm just calling everyone to action. If you haven't woken anyone up to the truth, any of these truths, or something that impacts us all and can be shown to be a deception, then please do. You know, I hope that we can stick together under the common banner of truth. There are countless issues we can choose to divide ourselves over, but it's imperative that we look past those, menial issues and come together with a shared goal of creating a better place for our future. The only way this will work is if we come together and remember that the enemy is not of flesh and blood, but of spiritual wickedness in high places. While I don't foresee God coming down to enact change anytime soon, just being honest, I do have faith that God will act through us all, and with faith, will gift everyone with the revelation of truth and love that has been granted to a few of us. When standing up for the truth in this world filled with deception, expect to be ridiculed, expect to be ostracized, and expect to be judged harshly. Just remember that this world is merely a proving ground for the soul, and repercussions for our actions will be weighed during our individual time of reckoning. We are not promised tomorrow, so it's important that we take action when we can today. Thanks so much for watching, guys. As you know, this channel is viewer supported, so if you would like to help me keep going, really could use your help. Facing some financial turmoil as usual. Got some medical problems in the family, as I've told you before. So, want to thank everyone that has chipped in and helped out in the past. All my Patreon supporters, thank you guys so much. I couldn't do it without you. And if you've been helped by any of this work or any of the work I've done in the past, please consider making a one-time contribution through PayPal or through Patreon. I'll put links up here and in the description. So with that, God bless you guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody. Make the earth shake. Make the earth shake. Make the earth shake.